Chapter 1. The sky was still misty. The room was as quiet as the dust on the thick walls. The dim light from the table lamp reflected off the half-finished glass of wine on the table, like the state of mind of someone who had crossed the line without knowing what he had done. Michael Starkweather stood there, looking at the woman before him. Laura Warwick, dark brown hair tangled, eyes sunken, as if winter had been hidden in them. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She was silent. More terrifying than sin was her unapologetically calm. "I won't call the police," he said, his voice as rough as a charred coal. She didn't ask why. There was no need to ask. She knew. He saw something in her, not innocence, but a crack. 1:15 a.m. The grandfather clock ticked softly from the hallway. Michael walked over to Richard Warwick's body. The powerful man was now a humanoid, slumped in a wheelchair, blood drying on his temple, a gun rolling onto the carpet, a well-staged death scene, or not staged at all. Michael leaned in, cautious like someone who had done this before, though in truth, he was just a failed diplomat, used to memos and diplomatic cocktails, not bloodstains and lies. He wiped the gun stock, then his hands. No fingerprints, no confession. Only the truth from this moment on. He was bound to her, Laura, in the most dangerous way, sharing a secret without knowing he was being drawn into a larger game. They sat in the living room, neither of them speaking for a long time. Outside, the fog was so thick it seemed to swallow the house. Michael poured more wine. She took a sip, her eyes never leaving the fireplace. "What kind of woman do you think I am?" Laura asked, her voice as soft as silk, falling on hardwood. Michael didn't answer right away. The question wasn't meant to be answered. It was a trap. A velvet-wrapped knife. The kind of woman who wouldn't shoot her own husband, but wouldn't stop someone else from doing it for her. She smiled. The smile had no light, just a practiced facial movement to mislead others. "You are smarter than you look, Mr. Starkweather." There was a sound. A slow footstep dragged down the old wooden hallway. They both turned. No one spoke. No one breathed heavily. The door slowly opened. Miss Bennet, the housekeeper, appeared. Her face was rigid, her eyes scanning them like an uncocked gun. "Sorry, I thought I heard something." Michael stood up immediately, assuming the air of an accidental visitor. "I came to see someone. My car broke down on the road. Miss Warwick was kind enough to let me stay the night." Miss Bennet nodded, but her eyes were unconvinced. "Yes, I will prepare the guest room." The door closed behind her. Silence returned. But they both knew now the pretense was temporary. Michael looked back at Laura. "Does anyone else know about this?" "No one knew I had a gun, but no one was stupid enough not to suspect." "And the son, Leonard." She glanced up, her eyes softening. "He knows more than anyone thinks. But Leonard lives in his own world. Sometimes, I'm not sure if that's an advantage or a disadvantage." Michael left the room, but did not go to bed. He returned to the study. A portrait of Richard hung on the wall, a dark suit, a stiff smile, eyes that seemed to pierce through time, a reminder that even in death, he still controlled this house. He looked around, then opened a desk drawer, files, invoices, an unsent letter. If you ever try to see Julian again, I swear to God I will. The writing stopped mid-sentence. The lines were crossed out violently. There was no name, but the handwriting was Richard's. Michael folded the letter and put it in his pockets. Laura wasn't the only one with motives. And he had entered a game where every piece had a blade up its sleeve. Chapter 2, 3:12 a.m. The wind began to pick up. The trees outside the window whipped against the glass as if someone were trying to break in. But the house stood there, silent, like a villain who had just wiped away his tracks. Michael sat alone in his study. The lights were dim. The curtains smelled of old paper and cigarette smoke. In his hand was an unsent letter from Richard Warwick, the first piece of evidence that love had long been stifled in this house. He pulled a cigarette from the pack in his jacket pocket. He lit it, the small light illuminating his face. Tense, but not afraid. Michael was not the type to be pushed to the edge, at least not before tonight. He couldn't sleep, not because of guilt, not because of the body in the next room, because of Laura. There was something about her, cold and yet fragile, like crystal cut from ashes. Every word she spoke left an echo, not the story of a woman who had just lost her husband, but the story of a woman who had long since lost her freedom and had just regained it with a gunshot. There was a soft knock at the door, an old-fashioned knock, two short ones, one long one. Michael opened the door. Laura stood there, still wearing her dark velvet dress, a glass of wine in her hand. "I can't sleep," she said. "Me too." She walked in without invitation, set her glass on the table. Her eyes scanned the pile of papers. "What are you looking for?" she asked. "Truth. Do you think you'll find it in Richard's mail?" "No, but I think if he was afraid of losing something, it would be here." Laura sat down in the chair opposite. She crossed her arms, her eyes glued to the trail of cigarette smoke rising to the ceiling. "You know, when Richard had his accident, people said it was a happy accident because he should have died. But he lived, and that was the tragedy for all of us. He tortured you." She laughed, a soundless laugh. "Not with my hands, with my words, with my silence. By making everyone in this house believe that I don't exist. Or if I do, it's only as a possession that can be locked up, broken, locked away." Michael was silent. For the first time in his life, he found himself at a loss for words. And in that silence, one thing became clear. She didn't kill Richard out of hatred. She killed him because she had nothing left to lose. There they sat, two souls drifting in the night. Not allies, not lovers. Just two people caught in the same tragedy, one late, one from within. "You should leave tomorrow morning," Laura said. "You have nothing to do with this." Michael stood up and walked toward her. "I was hooked from the moment I walked through your door, and you know it. So what do you want? To be a hero, a savior, or a replacement?" "Not a replacement," Michael whispered. "I want to know what I'm playing at before I choose sides." The knock came again. This time, there was no beat, no warning, just a cold knock that seemed to hit straight to the heart. They both turned. Laura shivered slightly. Michael motioned for her to be quiet and went to open the door. A man stood there. His cloak was wet, his face half hidden. I'm Julian Farrar, the man said. I heard something happened. The name stabbed straight into Laura's heart like a knife. Michael slowly tilted his head. What is it? Mr. Farrar. Julian glanced at Laura. Then Richard. I came to protect her. If it wasn't too late. Chapter 3. 34 a.m. The room froze the moment Julian Farrar entered. The wind from the hallway drifted in through the half-closed window, carrying a chill and a presence as heavy as unsmoked cigarette smoke. Laura stood slowly, her face expressionless. Michael held her gaze, as if reading a coded text in the other two's gestures. Julian removed his leather gloves, each movement deliberate, as if he were preparing to open a game of chess. I didn't expect you, Laura said, her voice not happy, not angry, just a tired admission. Laura, we had a deal, Julian replied, staring at her. Michael interjected, smiling faintly. I think this night is beginning to resemble a bad audition. Who's directing and who's acting? Julian glanced at Michael, assessing. Who are you? Stranger, Michael replied. Uninvited. Not planning to stay long. But it seems I came just in time to see some interesting facts. Julian turned to Laura. You shouldn't let strangers get involved in this. He's not like other people. She said, he's not afraid of blood. Michael smiled half-heartedly. As long as it doesn't drip on my shoe. Julian sighed. He walked slowly into the room, as if returning to an old scene, a place that had once been a home. Now, a cold battlefield. Is Richard dead? He asked. Laura nodded. The bullet to the heart. No one could survive a wound like that. Silence fell like a thick blanket. Michael sat down, slowly sipping the remaining wine in Laura's glass. And the question is, who shot and why? Julian looked at Laura. You didn't say anything to the police. Not yet. Michael arrived first. Julian's eyes darkened. He turned to Michael. So what are you going to do? Sell information blackmail? Or simply be a holy messiah? Michael stood up and faced him. I'm not selling anything, but I'm not giving it away for free either. I want to know how many pieces are in this game. And who's turning over first? Laura cut in, her voice almost cracking. Julian didn't come out of curiosity. He knew Richard was dying. He just didn't think it would be so soon. Julian was silent. The silence spoke louder than words. Michael looked at them both. So this is the plan. A carefully orchestrated murder. Two people working together, then splitting the spoils after the funeral. Laura turned away. Julian clenched his fists, but no one denied it. The clock struck 4. The night was fading, but the truth was just beginning to stir. Michael walked to the door. I won't call the police. Not yet, at least. But if you want me to keep quiet, I need the whole story, from the beginning. No lies, no scripts. Julian hesitated. Can you handle it? Michael replied. Without blinking, I saw the body. Now I want to see the soul that was killed before. Laura looked at Michael. Her eyes filled with fear and a strange sense of relief. Then you should know. Richard didn't die tonight. He died a long time ago. We just had time to bury the remains. Chapter 4:04. 8 a.m. Outside the window, mist hung over the woods like a vague warning. In the living room, that was now a silent crime scene, Michael stood between two suspects, Laura and Julian, both of whom looked like they knew more than they were saying, and both of whom seemed to be harboring the same unspoken guilt. "I've held court," Michael said, his eyes fixed on the portrait on the wall. Richard Warwick, alive and cold even in death. "I know when someone is making up a better version of the truth." Laura closed her eyes, just for a second, as if trying to remember some far-off night or bury it even deeper. "We didn't plan to kill him," she said, her voice dry. "But Richard, he left no choice." Julian took out a cigarette, the lighter shaking. He controlled everything: money, thoughts, fear, sex. Not a man, but a judge living in the house, always watching, always punishing. "And you," Michael turned to Laura. "Do you love him or fear him?" A bitter smile crossed her lips. First love, then fear, finally hate. But it all mixed together until it was indistinguishable. Michael walked slowly to the table, where old cigarette butts, an empty wine glass, and the pistol, the inanimate object that was now the center of it all, still lay as if waiting to be brought into the witness box. "This gun, whose is it?" "Richard's," said Julian. "Always kept by the bed. But tonight, it's in the living room," Michael whispered. "It's like someone's deliberately setting the stage." Silence fell again, like leaden rain. Michael knew the feeling when the truth is hidden behind the eyes, between the fragments of distorted memories. He turned to Laura, determined to get it over with. "You're not just a witness. You're a survivor. You were there when Richard died. And now you're rewriting it like a clumsy screenwriter. But the thing is, someone like me can always tell when the dialogue is fake." Laura stood up. "You want the truth? Then listen carefully." She stepped closer, close enough that Michael could see the red in her eyes, her breath reeking of alcohol and cigarettes. "Richard knew about me and Julian, knew about my plans to leave. He vowed he would never let me live. He would shame me, destroy me. That night, when I stepped down to say my last words, he was loaded, and I came just in time." Julian growled. Michael nodded slowly. "And instead of calling the police, you stage an accident or a break-in." "No," Laura interrupted. "We just stood there, watched him die. Nothing more. In the end, silence has its own sweetness." Michael looked back at the body that was still there, cold as the truth that no one wanted to face. 04:37 a.m. Michael stepped out into the hallway, his footsteps echoing through the now ghostly mansion. He wasn't sure who had done it or if there was even one. But he knew this. The truth here isn't in the gun or the blood. It's in the silence between words, in Laura's unreachable gaze, in the hidden creases on Julian's forehead. And if he wants to find the answer, he'll have to dig deep into layers of the past that everyone tries to keep locked away. Chapter 5:05. 16 a.m. Outside, the fog had begun to clear, but inside the Warwick mansion, everything was as thick as gunpowder that had not yet cleared. Michael sat alone in the study, a room that no one had dared to call a quiet place since the gunshots in the middle of the night. The police came, but not like a storm, like darkness creeping into the corners. Inspector Thomas Cadwallader, his face like stone, his voice honed from cold steel. "You were the first on the scene." Michael nodded, making no attempt to justify himself. "You walk in and find the body, but instead of calling right away, you talk to the wife." "Because I doubted," Michael replied, his eyes never leaving the lamp. "And I still doubt." "What did she say to you?" Michael smirked. "Half the truth. The rest she keeps locked behind her eyes." Cadwallader noted, "Sounds more like a screenwriter than a witness." Michael replied, "Maybe we are both screenwriters. The only difference is that I don't hide death behind beautiful lines." Laura was called in. She walked into the room like an actress who had memorized her script, but Michael saw the crack. "Miss Laura," Cadwallader asked, "can you repeat your statement?" "My husband is dead. I didn't kill him, but I didn't stop it from happening either." "What are you talking about?" "I'm saying I let him die. No saving, no screaming, no begging. Just standing there and waiting for it to end." Cadwallader raised an eyebrow. "Is that indifference or complicity?" Michael interjected coldly. "It's the consequences." Silence. Then Julian entered, stone-faced, his hands behind his back, a small gesture that Michael recognized as the habit of someone used to hiding weapons or truth. "When did you arrive at the scene?" Cadwallader asked. "After Richard died." "And what do you do?" "Hold her hand. Keep her from collapsing, that's all." "Do you know who killed him?" Julian looked the inspector straight in the eye. "I know who turned him into the monster everyone fears." Cadwallader closed the book. "I don't care about philosophy. I want facts." Michael rose from his seat. Slowly. "The truth isn't in the confessions, detective. It's in the things no one tells. In the injuries that go unreported. In a locked room that everyone has a key to." "So who do you think is the killer?" Michael raised his head, his eyes as black as the night sky that had not yet cleared. "It could be Laura. It could be Julian. It could be Richard who ended it. But I think he died a long time ago. It's just that his body didn't have time to stop breathing." 05:57 a.m. Cadwallader left with the forensic team. Michael stayed. Watching Laura, she had retreated into silence. A woman with nothing left to lose, or too much left to hide. "I will stay," Michael said. "Not for you, or Julian, or Richard, but for something that is missing. A story that lacks an ending." Laura asked only one question, her voice almost sobbing. "Aren't you afraid?" Michael smiled faintly. "I'm used to living with ghosts. At least, in this house, I know their names." Chapter 6, 06:21 a.m. The morning mist receded, leaving behind a gray landscape in the cold countryside. Inside the mansion, it was no longer the scene of death, but a battlefield of unburied memories. Michael walked the hallways, each step as if he were detecting mines, not because he was afraid of an explosion, but because he knew that what was exploding here was the truth. Library, another place of lies, wrapped in leather and dust of time. He sat in the old leather chair, took out the old photo album that the old servant said Richard had forbidden to touch. "Turn over." "A faded old photograph, Laura." as a young girl, standing between two men. One was Julian Young, arrogant, eyes barely frozen. The other, his face was unseen, but his arm around her shoulder said more than any name could. Michael pulled out his magnifying glass. A line of notes had been crossed out in fountain pen Cornwall trip, third person. "What are you looking for?" Laura's voice, appearing behind her like a ghost. Michael didn't look back. The truth, not the police's, not the press's. Yours. Nobody wants the truth. They just want someone to blame. So who is the person in the picture? Silence. Then Stephen? The first person to make me believe in goodness. And the first person to turn it into horror. Michael closed the album, and Richard knew about it. Laura nodded. He found Stephen, bribed him, then forced me to marry him to save the family honor. So was last night's death revenge. Laura smiled faintly. If I wanted revenge, Richard would have been dead on our wedding night. Michael stood up and moved closer. You didn't kill him, but someone did. And I think that someone loved you too. Laura turned away, hiding her face. But tears fell not of pain, but of relief. 07:02 a.m. Michael went out onto the porch, where Julian was smoking. Who is Stephen to you? Julian didn't look. The one who made Laura never look at me the same again. Will you see him again? Yes. Once. He was wandering around Italy, drinking and laughing like he had never crushed a soul. You killed him! Julian laughed, taking a deep breath. No, but I wish I had. All I told Richard was that Laura had a dangerous ex, and Richard never let that go. Michael paused. That is to say, Richard is dying, not just because of revenge, but because the ghost he created has returned. Julian nodded, and now, you're the only one who wants to know the truth. Chapter 7, 7:45 a.m. Kitchen. The smell of coffee brewed by the old maid was not enough to dispel the chill in her bones. Her name was Miss Bennet, a name as gentle as a country afternoon. But her eyes were cold and shrewd, as if she had looked over 100 corpses without frowning. Michael walked in, without knocking, without pretense of politeness. What did you see last night? Not a question, a fact. She did not answer immediately, just poured more coffee into the chipped cup. They think I'm asleep, she said softly. But I've worked for the Warwicks for over 30 years. I know when a house starts to smell rotten. Michael sat across from her, unpacking his cigarettes. Let's start from the moment you heard the gunshot. It wasn't the gunshots that woke me up. She said it was whispering. In the library, there were two people. A man, a woman. Michael frowned. You recognized their voices. A strange male voice. Not Richard. Not Julian. Not anyone from the family. And the woman, silent. Laura. She let go. She was whispering, begging. I don't know why. Michael wrote it down, quickly, as if each word were a shard of a long broken mirror. What happened next, Mrs. Bennet looked at him as if he were a child playing detective. Then I heard Richard scream. Then, boom. Then silence. Michael took a drag on his cigarette. And you did nothing. At my age, you don't run to where the gunfire is. You hear, you remember, you live. A silence fell between them. Then she pulled out from her apron a small object wrapped in an old handkerchief. A silver button, fallen near the library doorway. I didn't touch it. but I couldn't bear to let it go either. Michael took it. On the button, there were 2 capital letters engraved EW. Not Richard, not Julian. Do you know who owns it? She shrugged. I'm just a servant. But I know. Who wears the old-fashioned jacket with the name embroidered in every seam, Edward Warwick? Michael stood up, his eyes sharp as knives in the sunlight. Edward has been dead for many years. Sigh, Mrs. Bennet smiled. For the first time during the conversation, dead people can't talk. But if the living pretend to be dead, they will sometimes come back. At the right time. 08:10 a.m. Michael returns to the library. He ran his hand along the bookshelf, searching for the diary that Richard had hidden carefully, but not carefully enough to escape the eyes of a former spy. The page opens. The last date written. Laura saw the ghost again, and I knew she was never mine. I heard his voice. A voice I hadn't heard in 15 years, but I knew it was Edward. No one else could make my heart tremble with fear and hatred at the same time. Michael closed the diary. The dead return, or never died. Chapter 8. 8 a.m. Warwick attic. There were doors that should not be opened, and people who should not ask about the name Edward Warwick. But Michael was at the top of the house, where dust covered memories, and where every step of the stairs sounded like a silent cry in the rainy night. The room had been Edward's. It had been locked since he was presumed missing in the shipwreck off Naples. No body found. Only a wedding ring and a bloody cloth recovered. Michael took off his gloves and took the key he had furtively taken from Laura's drawer. The lock clicked, the dry sound of truth coming out of the darkness. The room was covered with dust, but there were no cobwebs. No one lived there, but someone clearly came and went often. There was a stain on the teacup, a head print on the pillow, and a book on the table, The Psychology of Guilt. Michael turned to the first page. Handwritten in blue ink, I never died. I just changed my mask. The one who lives in the dark is the one who sees clearly. EW. 09:0 a.m. West Corridor. Michael walked out of the room, his mind reeling. If Edward was alive, then Richard's suicide could have been a setup. Who in the house knows? And who is helping Edward? He stopped Miss Bennet in the hallway. Is there any way out from the attic? She didn't blink. Yes, the back door, leading straight into the woods. But it's been locked for 10 years. Locked with chains. But someone asked me for the key yesterday. Michael growled. Who? Laura, she replied. She said she wanted to go for a walk. 09:15 a.m. In the woods, Michael followed the damp footprints in the early grass. He stepped through the back gate, where the chain had been broken. Not broken, not cut. Unlocked with a key, the clearing in the woods echoed with the sounds of panting and cigarette puffs. Michael walked deeper until he found the abandoned cabin. An oil lamp flickered between the cracks in the wood. He approached the door, voiceless. Only a figure stood silently before the mirror, and when the figure turned around, Michael was stunned. Not Edward, not a stranger. It's Julian. Julian smiled wryly. Hi, Michael. Do you think Laura is the only one playing two-faced? Michael pulled out the gun, hidden in his jacket. What are you hiding? Julian stepped back, his hands still in his pockets. Hide number Michael. I'm rebuilding. What? A portrait of a traitor. The man who made Edward disappear. The man who pushed Richard to the brink. And you mean me? Julian shrugged. Which am I? You or me, or Laura, or all of us. Because Edward never died, and he's coming back. 9:30 a.m. Michael returns to the mansion. The wind began to blow, as if all the lies were being blown out of the old walls of this house. In his pocket, Michael clenched the piece of paper he had secretly taken from the cabin. A diagram, a map of the deaths. Each name crossed out in red pen. Richard, done. Laura, following. Julian, post-processing. Fussing. Michael, the last word is not underlined. Only has a question mark. Michael looked up at the attic. Edward, he whispered, your game is almost up, but I will be the one to show the last card. Chapter 9. 10:00 a.m. Warwick Mansion basement. Julian did not return to the cabin after his confrontation with Michael. He headed straight for the old basement, which had been a wine cellar but had been closed off since Richard's death because it was damp and dangerous. But Julian had the key. And in the darkness of the cellar, a small electric light dangled, illuminating a dust-scraped concrete wall. On it were photos, one by one, pinned with steel pins. Edward at 15. Edward at 21. At a military ceremony. Then an old photo torn in half. One half Edward, the other half Julian. He whispered, brother, I didn't kill you, but I didn't save you either. Now you're coming back to kill us all. 10:20 a.m. Laura's bedroom. Laura sat at her dressing table. She looked into the mirror, but her eyes didn't stop at her reflection. They seemed to go beyond it. Her hand fell on the second drawer where she'd kept the small pistol since Richard's death. The man walked in without knocking. You shouldn't have that thing. Laura, Michael said, his eyes glued to the gun. Laura was not afraid at all. I kept it to protect myself, not to kill. Then why didn't you tell the police about the attic key? Who did you give it to? What do you think? That I hid it from Edward. Or Julian. Both, Michael replied. And I think, you know Edward isn't dead. Laura stood up. Her eyes were as sharp as broken glass. I'm not sure Edward ever lived. 10:30 a.m. In the woods, where Edward's fake grave is, Michael walked through the wet undergrowth, pickaxe and flashlight in hand. He stopped at a small wooden marker, a fake grave that had been made to commemorate Edward after the shipwreck. Cherry. Each hoe stroke is heavy. 9 minutes later, he felt something hard hit the hoe. A small wooden chest sealed with barbed wire. Michael gasped. Cut the wire. Open the lid. Not the body. A dossier. Photos. Receipts. A fake passport. A German ID card. Name, Eric Weiss. Occupation unknown. Photo, Edward Warwick, but with a beard and bleached blonde hair. Michael whispered, not dead. Just changed name. Changed face. 10:45 a.m. Villa living room. Julian sat across from Laura. No one touched the teacups at the table. The room was as quiet as a cemetery waiting for the wind. Michael knows, said Julian. He dug it up. He saw everything. Laura didn't reply. Her eyes blinked slightly, her only response. Julian continued. If Edward returns, we must choose. Either stand together or die together. Laura stood up. I'm not afraid of dying. Julian, but I'm afraid of being fooled again. 11. 6 a.m. On the second floor balcony, Michael calls Inspector Cadell, but gets a busy signal. He knew he was running ahead of time. Edward, or Eric Weiss, or whatever name he used, was coming back, not to talk, but to finish. The wind whistled through the iron fence. He looked down into the woods, where the mist was beginning to curl, thick, and then he saw a figure, dressed in a gray coat, standing under the old elm tree, not moving, not running, just stand there, looking straight up at the balcony where he was standing. Michael gripped the railing tightly. Edward, Chapter 10, 11:30 a.m. The attic. Julian climbed the wooden stairs, each step echoing like a heart beating on a hangman's rope. The attic had not been renovated since Edward had died. Rotten wood, a musty smell, and a small window that looked out onto the woods. He opened the old drawer. Letters. Edward's handwriting. Not the letters Laura hid, the ones never sent. If you don't come back, find me in a place where no one wants to dig. If I come back, I won't let anyone take what's mine back. No love, no title, no blood. Julian clenched the paper. The room seemed to close around him. 12. Surger noon. Villa dining room. Laura sat with Stella, her mute sister-in-law, and Mrs. Warwick, her elderly mother, in a wheelchair. Lunch was cold. No one ate. Mrs. Warwick whispered, as if to herself. Edward said, "If it died, it would be because of someone in the family." I laughed. But maybe it knew. Stella stood up and walked out. Laura didn't stop her. In the dim light of an autumn noon, everything in the room looked like a painting scratched out with claws. 12:20 p.m. Backyard. Michael approached the tree where he had seen the figure that morning. There was no one there, only the footprints clear, circling and disappearing like magic. He bent down and picked up something, an ancient silver coin, marked with a horseshoe symbol. I've seen it before. In Edward's personal collection. Kept in a safe. You're playing prey, Michael muttered. And we're prey. The sound of footsteps behind him made him turn around. It was Stella. She held an old leather bag in her hand. She said nothing, just handed it over. Inside, photo of Laura and Richard. Taken through the bedroom window. A thick envelope. Inside was a life insurance policy in the name of Richard Warwick. Beneficiary Laura Warwick. Michael looked at Stella. How long have you known about this? She did not answer. But her eyes said one thing since before you came. But no one listens to those who do not speak. 12:40 p.m. Richard's private office. Old Julian, Laura, and Michael faced each other. No more polite words. No more tea. Just suspicion that congealed like dried blood on the carpet. Michael put the photo and contract on the table. Is this the real reason Richard died? Julian looked at Laura, then answered for her. Maybe, but not by her hand. Maybe someone knew about the contract, knew about the deception, and decided that Richard deserved to pay. Laura growled. I didn't kill him. But if I knew you were going to kill me, I wouldn't hesitate. Michael stood up. We don't have much time. Edward is playing his game, but we're killing each other first. 12:55 p.m. Ground floor, doorbell rings. The three people stood there, stunned. No one dared to step forward to open the door. The bell rang for the second time. Laura approached the door. Her hands were shaking slightly. The door opened. Nobody. Just a small parcel on the doorstep. Michael opened it. Inside was a Smith & Wesson pistol. Old, but still clean. And a typed line attached. When the time comes, only the first one to shoot will survive. Chapter 11. 1. 10 p.m. Villa Library. The gun lay in the middle of the table, like a sacrifice. No one touched it, but all eyes were on it. Michael sat across from Julian. Laura stood near the fireplace, her arms wrapped tightly around her, as if to retain some of the warmth she had left. "Do you know who sent the gun?" Laura asked, her voice unwavering but dry as burnt paper. Michael shook his head. No fingerprints, no return address. But it wasn't there to scare. It was an invitation. Kill who Julian let go. His eyes dark as the sky before a storm. Or a suggestion that someone should kill. Before being killed. 1:25 p.m. Backyard. Stella arranged the flowers silently. Each stem she chose. She cut close to the stem, as if removing every trace of life. Michael approached them. "Did you find the gun in the house?" She shook her head. "But do you know who put it on the door?" Another shake of the head. He sighed, staring at her. "Stella, if you want to live, I need to know who is alive and shouldn't be." Stella hesitated. Then she raised her hand and wrote with her finger on the frosted stone table. "Not Edward." Michael frowned. "You mean Edward didn't send the gun?" Stella nodded. "Then who?" Stella wrote again. "The hidden man is here." 1:50 p.m. Edward's old bedroom. Laura stepped inside. A dull yellow light filtering through the curtains. The room was unchanged. Everything was as it had been the day he had disappeared. She reached for the desk drawer. A photo fell out. Edward. Standing next to a strange man, both of their eyes were looking at the camera, as if mocking the photographer. "We know you're watching." On the back of the photo, a handwritten line in maroon ink reads, "Death is the only magic trick that requires the audience to believe in it." 2:10 p.m. Living room. The thunderstorm came earlier than expected. The thunder boomed. In the flash of lightning, Michael saw a figure standing in the hallway upstairs. "Julian," he called out. No one answered. He climbed 2 steps at a time, gun hidden in his coat pocket. The hallway was empty. A door closed softly at the end. Michael opened it, an empty room. On the wall, a line of words scrawled in lipstick. "Not everyone wants to be saved." 2:25 p.m. Dark hallway. Laura met Julian. Both tired, both with suspicions of each other lingering like the dust that covered this house. "Did you kill Richard?" she asked. Bluntly. Julian smiled, slowly, as if thinking about what crime to confess. "No, but I've dreamed of doing it. Does that count?" "Are not—" She looked at him. "So who is pulling all the strings?" Julian replied. "The only person who knows us better than we do. And he wants us to destroy each other before the truth is told." 2:40 p.m. The desk phone rings. Michael picked up the phone. The voice was distorted by the distortion through the transducer. 30 hours left. When the last person falls, you will understand why I don't need to do anything. I just need to open the door and let everyone push each other into the darkness. Hang up. Michael looked at the old clock on the wall. It stopped. A long time ago. Chapter 12:3. 05 p.m. Villa dining room. Everyone gathered around the table. Not because they were hungry, but because they were afraid of being alone. Each glance was like a silent test of the blade. The clock on the mantelpiece stood still at 12:07, the moment Richard Warwick died. Julian pushed back his chair and stood up. I can't stand this wait. If someone's playing cat and mouse, at least let us know which one we are. Laura looked at him, her eyes fixed. You're very good at playing the victim, and you're very good at rewriting other people's roles. Julian replied, his voice cold as steel. 13 balls. Richard's office. Michael opened the drawer Laura had searched again. This time, he found the note stuffed deep inside. A list of names. Stella, Julian, Meredith, Laura, Michael, Angela. Red lines were drawn over each name except one, Angela. He pulled out his phone and called the local sheriff. Angela Warwick has been dead for years, hasn't she? The person on the other end of the line sighed. Dead, but no body. Disappeared in the fire. They say it was an accident, but I'm not sure. 3:30 Sabcho. Greenhouse garden. Laura found Meredith. She was tending orchids, her hands covered in dirt, but her eyes held the keen look of someone who had seen more than she cared to. Why are you still staying? Laura asked. Meredith didn't look up. Because I know who's trying to turn this house into a grave, and I'm not leaving until I find the right coffin. You mean Angela? Meredith chuckled. She never died. She just learned to live with a new face and the same anger. 3:55 p.m. Attic. Julian followed the sound light, but clear steps, like the breathing of someone who had lived too long in silence. Light from the skylight filtered through the wood, illuminating the metal box in the middle of the attic floor. He opened the lid. Inside are black and white photos. A smiling mother, a child with his face erased, and one with the caption, "No portrait can hold the ghost." A figure ran behind. He turned back. No one. Only the smell of cold ashes remains. 4:10 p.m. Stella room. Michael found Stella huddled in the corner, her hands drawing endless spirals on the wooden floor. Stella, he called softly. She looked up. There was no madness in her eyes, just anticipation. She won't stop until everyone is gone, she whispered. Angela is always the last one to turn off the lights. Michael held his breath. You sure it's Angela? She's alive. Stella nodded. She never died. We just forgot how to recognize her. 4:30 p.m. Basement locked. Laura picked up the iron key that Richard had hidden under the still life. The rusty door creaked as she opened it. In the dim light she saw a wooden chair tied with rope, an old gramophone playing a broken record repeating, "I'll be seeing you," an old dress half burned, and the words in dried blood, "No one leaves this house until he is actually dead." 4:45 p.m. Central hallway. Michael met Laura, and both of them saw enough to understand no one could wash their hands clean of this blood. Everyone had stood close to death and had accidentally kept silent. Laura said, "If she's alive, we don't have much time." Michael nodded. And if it wasn't her, but someone else wearing Angela's angry mask, they turned back to look at the stairs leading to the second floor where new footsteps echoed. Not fast. Take your time, but sure. Chapter 13, 5 p.m. Second floor stairs. The footsteps disappeared before Laura and Michael reached the top. The hallway was so quiet that they could hear each other breathing. The doors on either side were closed, as if the house was keeping its own secret. Michael clenched his hand around the flashlight. It could just be an echo. No, Laura interrupted, her eyes fixed on the door at the end of the hall. The footsteps have weight. Someone is here in the flesh. She walked over and pushed the door open. The room was empty, but the cushion on the chair was still dented as if someone had just sat on it. 5:15 p.m. Richard's diary. Michael took the leather-bound book from Richard's desk drawer. The first few pages contained meetings, invoices, and arrogant maxims. But halfway through the book, the writing changed to shaky, distorted, as if written under pressure or panic. Meredith knows, but she believes she's in control. Julian is weak, easily bribed. Laura is too smart. She'll kill me if she finds out. Angela, God, if it comes back, I won't survive. I locked the basement, but all locks have keys. I saw that white dress in the mirror, but there was no one behind me. Michael closed the book, shuddering. 5:30 p.m. Art gallery. Meredith was dusting off a large painting, a scene of a desolate garden, with a woman's back turned to the viewer, her face unseen. She used to draw Angela. Meredith whispered, but never the eyes. Laura stepped in. Meredith, you said she wasn't dead. Are you bringing her back? Meredith smiled sadly. I don't help anyone. I just don't stop them. Because someone has to pay. For what? Laura growled. For the night, we all left a little girl crying in silence. 5:45 p.m. Villa exterior. The sky darkened. A mist crept up from the lake, wrapping the garden like a shroud. Julian stepped outside to breathe, but it wasn't air. He felt it was pressure. He saw a white shadow gliding through the trees. Angela, he called. No answer. But when he turned around, a photo fell out of his pocket. A little girl in a white dress, standing behind a half-open door. Text after photo. I will not close the door this time. 6:00 p.m. Attic. Stella was gone. Michael and Laura found a trail of mud leading up to the attic. The top door was ajar, and the wind made the flashlight sway. Stella sat there, next to a tattered suitcase. What did you find? Laura asked. Stella opened the suitcase. Letters written in a childish hand, signed A.W. A charred teddy bear, a strand of hair tied with a red ribbon, and an old recording, a baby crying, then adults arguing, then a hoarse, muffled scream. Michael heard and fell silent. Stella whispered, "This is not a ghost. This is an unburied memory." 6:15 p.m. Living room. All gathered together, no longer able to keep a calm face. Michael, we are no longer dealing with a case. We are dealing with a survivor, and we are seeking justice in our own way. Julian, if it was Angela, then who killed Richard? Laura, maybe it was her, or someone trying to frame her. Meredith, we all have reasons to kill him. The question is, who has the courage to make the first move? Everyone looked at each other and realized the answer was no longer in the past. It was right here in this room. Chapter 14, 6:30 p.m. Police raid. The front door suddenly opened. 2 policemen entered. No knock, no invitation, no warning. Behind them was a strange man in a long coat, his face expressionless, his gaze as sharp as a scalpel. He was no stranger to Laura, or rather, to a part of her life she had tried to bury. Michael took a step back. Who are you? The man pulled out a card. Special Inspector Rayner, from CID, called in by an anonymous source, but with very specific evidence. He placed the thick envelope on the table. Everyone in the room's blood seemed to stop flowing when he opened it. An old gun, still stained with dried blood. A handwritten note begins and ends here. A tape recording, marked Untold Story, R. 6:40 p.m. Events from 5 years ago. Reiner ran the tape through the old tape recorder the police used to recover ancient data. The sound was choppy and distorted, but the voice was still recognizable as Richard Warwick's. I made the wrong choice, the wrong person, the wrong time. I thought I had everything under control. But that girl heard, and if she tells, this whole empire will fall. Gasping, a distant explosion. Not sure if it was a gunshot or something else. Meredith thinks she owns this house. Laura thinks she's a grieving widow. Julian thinks he's innocent. And I know I created the demon. A loud knock. Then a woman's voice whispered, choked with tears. She didn't die. Richard, she just learned to live with fear. Recording stopped. 6:50 p.m. White shadow appears. Stella stood up. Her hand was clutching something, a silver ring shaped like a wolf's head. The light making it glint like the eye of a predator. This, she said, belongs to Angela. Meredith trembled. How did you get it? Because I was the one who dug it up in the back garden, where the old servant's hut used to be. She walked out into the room. Her face no longer immature, but hard, with determination. Angela didn't die. She survived by becoming someone else. Stella took off her coat. Underneath was an old white dress, speckled with mud, but intact, as if time had never touched it. 7:00 p.m. Statement. Rayner stepped towards her. You say you are Angela Warwick. Stella, no. Angela looked up. It's not me saying. It's them knowing. She pointed at Laura, Julian, and Meredith. I am your son, buried alive in silence. I am not back for revenge. I am back to restore memories so that none of you will be allowed to sleep again. Laura hissed. You can't prove anything. Angela smiled faintly. The proof is not in my hands, but in your sleep, where no one dares return. 7:10 p.m. Calm before the storm. No one said anything. The wind outside whistled through the window like the house sobbing. Lights flickered. Night began to swallow every corner. Angela or Stella, or the composite image of an undying memory stood there, silent as a sentence yet to be pronounced. And then Rayner turned to Michael. We need to search the basement again. Now, there's something that was never recorded. Michael nodded. Laura stepped back, her face pale. Angela whispered, just loud enough for Michael to hear, don't seek the truth if you're not prepared to live with it. Chapter 15, 7:30 p.m. Basement opens. Rayner, along with Michael, headed toward the iron door that led down to the basement. The door was rusty and old, as if it hadn't been opened in years. Laura stood at the top of the stairs, her eyes frozen. You have no right. Rayner didn't need an answer. He pushed open the door. The hinges creaked like a scream strangled for years. The flashlight beam swept down the stairs. Dust rose, but it couldn't mask the smell, a mix of mold, rotting earth, and something sickeningly sweet. Michael covered his nose. Something died down there. Angela, standing on the steps, spoke. As light as the wind, not death, but the corruption of things hidden. 7:38. Oh. Underground. The basement is small, narrow, and closed. There was a locked safe, a broken chair, a half-burned candle, and a trail of rope hanging like an unfinished confession. Raynor picked the lock. Inside was a leather-bound book, torn, but with the handwriting intact. R.W. Richard Warwick's diary. Written by himself. Angela knows too much. She saw. I can't let her tell. Laura, help me reconstruct the scene. The fire would erase all traces, but that scream still haunts me. The girl should have died. I hear its footsteps in my dreams every night. Its gaze, as if it were still alive. 7:45 p.m. The ghost in the diary. Angela was silent. Her eyes were tearless, cold, bright, unusual. That was the last time he dared to look straight at me. Julian stepped forward. It can't be. There's no way you're still alive. Angela tilted her head. No one survives a fire unless they start it. Raynor turned to Laura. Do you want a lawyer? Laura was silent. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear, but from anger. You guys don't understand. I didn't kill Angela. I saved her Richard. Richard is the monster. I was just trying to stop him. Angela chuckled. You stopped it by hiding, by leaving me the baby locked down here, praying for the fire to do the rest. 7:55 p.m. Mind game. Julian grabbed the notebook. None of this evidence is legitimate. The writing could be faked. The recording could be fabricated. Raynor nodded. You're right. But what if the DNA in the fingernails of the missing body on the ground matches Angela's? Angela looked straight at Julian. You better pray I don't remember more. Julian stepped back, but the floor beneath his feet suddenly shook slightly. A small crack appeared, as if the house itself could not bear the secret pressure. Angela whispered, This is not just a home. This is a grave. 8:00 p.m. Silence of the room. No one spoke. No one moved. There was only a faint sound from behind the basement wall, like someone tapping. 3 times. Pause. Then again. Michael turned back. Maybe no one has ever left this place. Angela closed her eyes slightly. Everyone thinks death is the end. But actually, it's just when the truth begins to whisper. Chapter 16, 8:02 p.m. The whispering wall. The knocking continued. 3 times. Stopped. Then 3 more times. Raynor pointed his flashlight at the stone wall behind him. It seemed unremarkable, until the light hit a rectangular crack too regular to be natural. Michael bent down and touched the edge of the stone. This used to be a door. It was plastered over. Angela stood still, staring. I used to hear it from there, every night, before the fire took over the house. Laura struggled to say, Don't open it. You don't know what you're doing. But Raynor had already thrust the crowbar into the crack. A dry crack sounded, and the smell of decay welled up, like time forced to breathe again. 8:05 p.m. Underground cell. The stone door opened, revealing a small compartment about 2 meters square. Inside, a rusty iron bed, iron chains hanging from the ceiling, a broken light bulb, a handprint stained with dried blood on the wall, and a body. No just skin and bones, but the teeth were intact, eyes closed. On the hand was a silver bracelet engraved with 2 words. Belle. Angela gasped. Margaret. Raynor nodded. Your sister. Angela nodded, as if in a trance. She disappeared when I was 7. Richard said she went to study abroad, but I remember her crying through the cliff, and Laura sat down, exhausted. I didn't know he hid it after that. I thought he buried it in the river like he did before. The words fell like a knife, cutting through the night. Come I saw ye. Julian was stunned. The previous times. 8:10 p.m. The verdict is not justice. Michael gasped. Are we standing on a mass grave? Raynor did not reply. He carefully opened the tin box under the iron bed. Inside was a string of human teeth tied with red thread. The black and white photograph shows 6 girls, all of whom disappeared from the area's records 20 years ago. A slim notebook, Richard's list. Number 5, Margaret. Opposition. To be eliminated. Number 6, Angela. Transform. Monitor. Number 7, Laura. Cooperate if necessary, but do not trust. Number 8, Julian. Potential or possible threat, Angela whispered. He made a list? Like a survival plan. A world where only he chooses who deserves to live. 8:15 p.m. Court in the dark. Raynor stepped out of the cell. This story is no longer about a murder. This is about victims who have been silenced, buried alive by lies. Julian looked at Laura. You knew. From the beginning. You chose to stand with the devil. Laura screamed, I choose to live. And you people who have never had to be friends with evil every day. Angela looked at her, without resentment, without pity. You did not choose evil, but you chose silence. 8:20 p.m., the last whisper. The house was sweating. Cold air crept up from the ground, as if to swallow everything back into silence. Angela placed her hand on the stone wall, gently. Margaret was here, every night, alone. And no one listened. Raynor stood behind her. Now someone is listening. Angela smiled, not of relief, but the dark smile of someone who has just opened a door that cannot be closed again. Chapter 13. 9. 03 p.m. The darkness speaks. The wind blew through the broken windows, screaming like someone screaming in a dream. In the living room, the firelight danced across scattered files, photographs of missing girls, scribbles in Richard Warwick's notebooks. Raynor stood motionless. He was reading the last name on the list, number 10, M. No full text, no description, just a letter. A letter like a ghost. Julian asked, Who is M? Angela sat quietly by the fire. Margaret is number 5. I am number 6. M cannot be my sister. Raynor nodded. Maybe it was Richard's man, or someone who continued the work after he died. Laura laughed dryly. Do you still think he did it alone? Warwick did not create this cult alone. He was just the arm, not the brains. 9:07 p.m. Room sealed. Angela took them upstairs, to the room that had been locked since Richard's death. Inside is a small library. No dust. Someone still comes in and out regularly. In the middle of the room was a table with a map of the city. Each location was marked in red, the girls' names, the date they disappeared, the date they were eliminated. This network is bigger than we thought, Julian whispered. Rayner opened the drawer, a thick envelope handwritten to M. Next Plan. Inside were top-secret documents, Liechtenstein bank statements, medical records, a black and white portrait of a slim, smiling man. Familiar. Angela turned pale. This is Dr. Lewis, the one who treated my mother. Rayner nodded. Maybe this is M. 9:10 p.m. Missing. The wooden floor creaked. Then silence. Michael called down Angela. No response. Rayner turned on his flashlight. The stairs were empty. The wind was still howling, but there were no footprints, no breathing. Laura whispered. She said she heard the whisper. Now, she herself becomes one. Julian gritted his teeth. She disappeared like Margaret. 9:15 p.m. Role play. Inside the library, Richard's notebook falls off the shelf. The last page opens. There's new writing. Angela. Number 11. The plan continues. Starting from the roots, Rayner froze. She didn't disappear. She transformed. Laura stepped back, trembling. She made a choice. To side with the shadow. Michael muttered. Or did it choose her? 9:17 p.m. Mirror of the soul. Rayner looked into the wall mirror. In the reflection, he didn't see Julian. He didn't see Laura. I only saw myself and Angela standing behind me, smiling faintly. When I turned back, no one was there. The mirror still reflected. But now, he could no longer see himself. 9:20 p.m. Last knock. The basement door opened by itself. The wind wasn't strong enough. From deep below, 3 knocks came. Stop. 3 more, Michael said slowly. Someone just got the signal. The game starts again. Rayner walked toward the stairs. No, the game never ended. It just waits for a new player. Chapter 18, 9:24 p.m. Unnamed basement. Rayner descended the stairs as if his feet were sinking into tar. Each sound rang out in the darkness like an indictment. The flashlight in his hand shook not with fear, but with intuition. Something was waiting. The basement door opened into an old brick room. On the walls were black and white photos of missing girls, arranged in a circle like some kind of symbol. In the middle was an old wooden chair with broken ropes. Someone had been held here on the damp ground. A sentence was scrawled in charcoal. Choose one victim or follower. He breathed heavily. Angela. 9:27 p.m. The woman with 2 faces. Angela stood at the back of the room, her dark coat covered in dust, her hair disheveled as if she had just emerged from some dark ritual. But her eyes were clear, calm. Here you are, she said. I thought you weren't coming. Rayner tightened his grip on the gun. You are me, wait, She shook her head, slowly. I am the last one who chooses not to be silent. And because of that, I'm heard. He stepped closer. You are obsessed with Richard. No, Angela whispered. I am haunted by the silence of people like you. You know, but you do nothing, like everyone else. 9:30 p.m. Dialogue before the dark. Raynor growled, "You killed Margaret." Angela smiled slightly, not answering right away. She knew the truth, but instead of destroying it, she wanted to keep it, to control it. That's when I knew. Someone like her never stops. And you are different. I break, let everything fall apart. Because only when it falls apart can it be rebuilt. Raynor took another step. That's not justice. That's crime. Angela looked him straight in the eye. Then shoot me. Like you should have done to Richard. 9:33 p.m. Choices. He raised the gun. His hand stopped shaking, but his finger didn't pull the trigger. There was something in her eyes that stopped him, some crack between sanity and panic. Angela whispered, "If you shoot me, the game will start over. If you let go, I will leave. Forever. But you will never know what will happen." Silent. A drop of water fell from the ceiling, echoing like the knock of fate. Yamamasai. Raynor lowered his gun. 9:36 p.m. Light recedes. Angela turned away. Her shadow melted into the darkness at the end of the tunnel, then disappeared like a spell broken. On the table was a new notebook, not Richard's. The first page says, "Everyone has a basement. The question is, do they dare to open the door?" 9:40 p.m. Back to Earth. Raynor stepped out of the cellar. Julian, Laura, and Michael were waiting. No one asked what he had found. No one asked about Angela, because they know if they have to ask, then they shouldn't know. Chapter 19. 6:12 a.m. Raynor office. The smell of cold coffee mixed with the smell of old paper in the simple room. On the desk, files lay open like unread accusations. Raynor sat upright, his chin resting on his hand. The early morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, cutting his face in two, one side human, the other petrified. He let her go. Not out of fear, not out of trust, but because he needed to know if Angela really was the final link. Then why wasn't the nightmare over? 6:35 a.m. Call from Laura. "Raynor!" Laura gasped through the phone. Something happened. A woman hanged in an abandoned chapel on the edge of town. Her left wrist was cut, but not deep. Like ritual. "Have notes?" "No, but her name is Teresa March. Single mother. Missing 3 days ago. Not connected to Richard. At least not on record. No one goes missing unrelated," Raynor replied. 7:15 a.m. Saint. Felicity Chapel, abandoned. Cracked bricks. Collapsed ceilings. Stained glass windows splintered like dried blood. The police had cordoned off the area, but no one entered. They waited for him. As usual, Teresa's body was still hanging, but what caught Raynor's attention was what was underneath a Polaroid photo neatly placed on a pedestal. Old, blurry, but clear enough to see. Angela's face. Not a candid shot. She was looking straight into the lens, smiling. Back of the handwritten photo. "You let me go, so I'll go on. Can you handle that?" 8:00 a.m. The return of darkness. Laura stepped forward, her eyes bewildered. "Raynor, I met this woman, Teresa, 3 weeks ago. She asked about Margaret. Said she had a letter to send to someone." Raynor frowned. "You're not lying. You think I have something to do with this?" "No. I think this goes deeper than we think." He turned away, walked to the chapel door, and looked out into the woods. That feeling returned. The feeling that this was no longer a case. This was a message, a call, a test. 9:12 a.m. Angela's diary delivered via mail. Brown envelope. No return address. Only the words, "Open if you dare." Rayner opened it, his heart sinking as he recognized the handwriting. It was Angela. "I didn't kill Teresa, but I told her about this town's secret. She wanted to expose it. I warned her that the truth wouldn't save her. Now, do you understand? Don't look for me. Look for what scares you the most. For it is not I who am the darkness. It is you who carried the torch into the tomb." 9:45 a.m. Decision. Rayner laid the letter on the table. No one in town believed Angela was still around, but he knew she wasn't leaving. She was playing a trick. She was paving the way for something bigger. No one has ever died for the truth, but many have died for telling it. Rayner stood up. Today, he was not investigating. Today, he was chasing. Not a killer, but the storyteller. Chapter 20, 11:03 a.m. Old route to Woodvale Nursing Home. Rayner's car rolled past the edge of town, where the woods crowded the sidewalks, pressing the sky like a dark veil. Woodvale, where his mother had lived in silence, where he had sworn he would never return. But today, all paths led back, and the past reeked of decay. Rayner parked. The nursing home was a ruin now. Abandoned after a fire 5 years ago. But there were signs the door had been broken in from the inside. Someone had been going in and out, and according to Angela, what he feared most was here. 11:27 a.m. Inside Woodvale. The ceiling was moldy. The hallway was wet, and dim light filtered through a cracked window, illuminating an object in the middle of the main room. It was an old projector, and on the wall, a running image, footage from old surveillance camera, a hospital room. An old woman lies motionless. A man stands by the bed, leaning over and whispering. Rayner. His voice came through the creaking speaker. "Mother, you must not say anything. They will not understand. They will only destroy what we are trying to hold on to." A high-pitched laugh came from the projector. It wasn't his mother's voice. It was Angela's. Then the screen turns off. 11:40 a.m. The truth revealed. The opposite wall was covered with photos. Victims from the Richard Warwick case. A girl named Teresa. A boy who had gone missing in 2004. And Rayner's own mother. Scrawled beneath each one, "The dead do not need justice. The living need to know why they are silent." Rayner backed away. His back hit the rotten wood door. There was movement behind him. "Laura, you're not surprised, are you?" she said. Rayner did not turn. "How long has it been?" "From the moment the Warwick thing happened. Angela didn't do it alone. We just did what had to be done." "And what is that?" "Let a town not continue to hide." 12:06 p.m. Final decision. Laura pulled out her phone and showed it to Rayner. A recording. His voice. A confession. "I knew Richard didn't die by accident. I saw Angela wiping away the blood, but I left it alone." "Will you plead guilty?" Laura asked, as if negotiating a contract. "No," Rayner replied. "I will tell it, all of it, but in my own words." 13, Sarah. Old Town radio station. Rayner walked into the broadcast booth and sat down at the microphone. There was no editing, no prelude music, just the truth. "This is John Reiner," he said, "and I was a sheriff. I covered up. I believed that silence was protection. But now I understand all crime is born in the dark, and the dark only exists when no one dares to turn on the lights." He began to tell. 14. 12. Conclusion. Angela was not arrested. Laura was not convicted. Rayner was not pardoned. But the town changed. People began to ask. They began to remember. And in the corner of an old cafe, a woman with steely eyes smiled as she heard his voice on the radio. Angela. She sipped her coffee. Not everyone who tells a story is innocent, but at least they dare to tell it. Chapter 21. Sergeant Cadwallader's announcement was greeted with a stunned silence. Laura put her hand to her mouth to stifle a cry, then slowly moved back to the desk chair and sat, staring at the floor. Mrs. Warwick lowered her head and leaned on her stick. Starkweather paced about the room, looking distracted. "Are you sure he's dead?" the inspector asked. "I am indeed," the sergeant replied. "Poor young lad," shouting defiance at me, loosing off his gun as though he loved the firing of it. The inspector walked across to the French windows. "Where is he? I'll come with you and show you," the sergeant replied, struggling to his feet. "No, you'd better stay here." "I'm all right now," the sergeant insisted. "I'll do all right until we get back to the station." He walked out onto the terrace, swaying slightly, looking back at the others, his face filled with misery. He murmured distractedly, "One would not, sure, be frightful when one's dead. That's Pope, Alexander Pope." He shook his head and then walked slowly away. The inspector turned back to face Mrs. Warwick and the others. "I'm more sorry than I can say, but perhaps it's the best way out," he said, then followed the sergeant out into the garden. Mrs. Warwick watched him go. "The best way out," she exclaimed, half angrily, half despairingly. "Yes, yes," Miss Bennet sighed. "It is for the best. He's out of it now. Poor boy." She went to help Mrs. Warwick up. "Come, my dear, come. This has been too much for you." The old lady looked at her vaguely. I'll go and lie down," she murmured, as Miss Bennet supported her to the door. Starkweather opened it for them, and then took an envelope out of his pocket, holding it out to Mrs. Warwick. "I think you'd better have this back," he suggested. She turned in the doorway and took the envelope from him. "Yes," she replied. "Yes, there's no need for that now." Mrs. Warwick and Miss Bennet left the room. Starkweather was about to close the door after them when he realized that Angel was moving across to Laura, who was still sitting at the desk. She did not turn at his approach. "May I say, madam?" Angel addressed her. "How sorry I am. If there is anything I can do, you have only—" Without looking up, Laura interrupted him. "We shall need no more help from you, Angel." She told him coldly, "You shall have a check for your wages, and I should like you out of the house today." "Yes, madam. Thank you, madam," Angel replied, apparently without feeling, then turned away and left the room. Starkweather closed the door after him. The room was now growing dark, the last rays of the sun throwing shadows on the walls. Starkweather looked across at Laura. "You're not going to prosecute him for blackmail?" he asked. "No," Laura replied, listlessly. A pity. He walked over to her. Well, I suppose I'd better be going. I'll say goodbye. He paused. Laura still had not looked at him. Don't be too upset, he added. I am upset. Laura responded with feeling. Because you loved the boy? Starkweather asked. She turned to him. Yes. And because it's my fault. You see, Richard was right. Poor Jan should have been sent away somewhere. He should have been shut up where he couldn't do any harm. It was I who wouldn't have that. So, really, it was my fault that Richard was killed. Come now, Laura, don't let's sentimentalize. Starkweather retorted roughly. He came closer to her. Richard was killed because he asked for it. He could have shown some ordinary kindness to the boy, couldn't he? Don't you fret yourself. What you've got to do now is to be happy. Happy ever after, as the stories say. Happy with Julian. Laura responded with bitterness in her voice. I wonder. She frowned. You see, it isn't the same now. You mean between Farrar and you? He asked. Yes. You see, when I thought Julian had killed Richard, it made no difference to me. I loved him just the same. Laura paused, then continued. I was even willing to say I'd done it myself. I know you were, said Starkweather. More fool you. How women enjoy making martyrs of themselves. But when Julian thought I had done it, Laura continued passionately, he changed. He changed towards me completely. Oh, he was willing to try, to do the decent thing and not incriminate me. But that was all. She leaned her chin on her hand, dispirited. He didn't feel the same anymore. Starkweather shook his head. Look here, Laura, he exclaimed. Men and women don't react in the same way. What it comes down to is this. Men are really the sensitive sex. Women are tough. Men can't take murder in their stride. Women apparently can. The fact is, if a man's committed a murder for a woman, it probably enhances his value in her eyes. A man feels differently. She looked up at him. You didn't feel that way, she observed. When you thought I had shot Richard, you helped me. That was different, Starkweather replied quickly. He sounded slightly taken aback. I had to help you. Why did you have to help me? Laura asked him. Starkweather did not reply directly. Then, after a pause, he said quietly, I still want to help you, don't you see? Said Laura, turning away from him. We're back where we started. In a way, it was I who killed Richard, because I was being so obstinate about Jan. Starkweather drew up the stool and sat down beside her. That's what's eating you, really, isn't it? He declared, finding out that it was Jan who shot Richard. But it needn't be true, you know. You needn't think that unless you like. Laura stared at him intently. How can you say such a thing? She asked. We all heard he admitted it. He boasted of it. Oh, yes, Starkweather admitted. Yes, I know that. But how much do you know about the power of suggestion? Your Miss Bennet played Jan very carefully, got him all worked up, and the boy was certainly suggestible. He liked the idea, as many adolescents do, of being thought to have power, of being a killer, if you like. Your Benny dangled the bait in front of him, and he took it. He'd shot Richard, and he put a notch on his gun, and he was a hero. He paused. But you don't know. None of us really know whether what he said was true. But for heaven's sake, he shot at the sergeant. Laura expostulated. Oh, yes. He was a potential killer, all right, Starkweather admitted. It's quite likely he shot Richard, but you can't say for sure that he did. It might have been. He hesitated. It might have been somebody else. Laura stared at him in disbelief. But who? She asked, incredulously. Starkweather thought for a moment. Then, Miss Bennet, perhaps, he suggested. After all, she's very fond of you all, and she might have thought it was all for the best, or, for that matter, Mrs. Warwick, or even your boyfriend Julian, afterwards pretending that he thought you'd done it. A clever move, which took you in completely. Laura turned away. You don't believe what you're saying, she accused him. You're only trying to console me. Starkweather looked absolutely exasperated. My dear girl, he expostulated. Anyone might have shot Richard. Even McGregor. McGregor, she asked, staring at him. But McGregor's dead. Of course he's dead, Starkweather replied. He'd have to be. He rose and moved to the sofa. Look here, he continued. I can put up a very pretty case for McGregor having been the killer. Say he decided to kill Richard as revenge for the accident in which his little boy was killed. He sat on the sofa arm. What does he do? Well, first thing is he has to get rid of his own personality. It wouldn't be difficult to arrange for him to be reported dead in some remote part of Alaska. It would cost a little money and some fake testimony, of course, but these things can be managed. Then he changes his name, and he starts building up a new personality for himself in some other country, some other job. Laura stared at him for a moment, then left the desk and went to sit in the armchair. Closing her eyes, she took a deep breath, then opened her eyes and looked at him again. Starkweather continued with his speculative narrative. He keeps tabs on what's going on over here. And when he knows that you've left Norfolk and come to this part of the world, he makes his plans. He shaves his beard and dyes his hair and all that sort of thing, of course. Then, on a misty night, he comes here now. Let's say it goes like this. He went and stood by the French windows. Let's say McGregor says to Richard, I've got a gun, and so have you. I count 3, and we both fire. I've come to get you for the death of my boy. Laura stared at him, appalled. You know, Starkweather went on, I don't think that your husband was quite the fine sporting fellow you think he was. I have an idea. He mightn't have waited for a count of 3. You say he was a damn good shot, but this time he missed, and the bullet went out here. He gestured as he walked out onto the terrace, into the garden where there are a good many other bullets. But McGregor doesn't miss. He shoots and kills. Starkweather came back into the room. He drops his gun by the body, takes Richard's gun, goes out of the window, and presently he comes back. Comes back, Laura asked. Why does he come back? Starkweather looked at her for a few seconds without speaking. Then, taking a deep breath, he asked, Can't you guess? Laura looked at him wonderingly. She shook her head. No, I've no idea, she replied. He continued to regard her steadily. After a pause, he spoke slowly and with an effort. Well, he said, suppose McGregor has an accident with his car and can't get away from here. What else can he do? Only one thing. Come up to the house and discover the body. You speak, Laura gasped. You speak as though you know just what happened. Starkweather could no longer restrain himself. Of course I know. He burst out passionately. Don't you understand? I'm McGregor. He leaned back against the curtains, shaking his head desperately. Laura rose, an incredulous look on her face. She stepped towards him, half raising her arm, unable to grasp the full meaning of his words. You, she murmured. You. Starkweather walked slowly towards Laura. I never meant any of this to happen, he told her, his voice husky with emotion. I mean finding you, and finding that I cared about you, and that, oh God, it's hopeless. Hopeless, as she stared at him, dazed. Starkweather took her hand and kissed the palm. Goodbye, Laura, he said, gruffly. He went quickly out through the French windows and disappeared into the mist. Laura ran out onto the terrace and called after him. Wait, wait, come back. The mist swirled, and the Bristol fog signal began to boom. Come back, Michael, come back. Laura cried. There was no reply. Come back, Michael, she called again. Please come back, care about you too. She listened intently, but heard only the sound of a car starting up and moving off. The fog signal continued to sound as she collapsed against the window and burst into a fit of uncontrollable sobbing.